Hi everyone, good morning and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Janesh. I'm an early stage venture investor here in Southeast Asia, focusing on investments broadly across Fintech, Insurtech, and digital health. We've been around for a few years, and obviously some of my panelists have been around in the space much longer. One of the areas that we think are the most interesting in Insurtech and overall within financial services is insurance. And how we think this part of the world is going to be somewhat different to what we've seen in other parts of the world. So I'm quite fortunate to have quite a broad section of panelists with me. And rather than me explaining what they do, I think it's probably best that they explain what they do, what they're building, what their backgrounds are, and then we can take it from there. So George, maybe start with you.
Cool. Thanks, Janesh. Hi, everybody. I'm George Kesselman. So I run a startup called Anipi, and we are a startup that specializes in B2B insurance. I've been around the Insurtech space here from, I would say, early days in Southeast Asia, from where it just first began in 2015, and up to now, been quite actively involved first as the ecosystem approach, and then we've kind of went full on into the startup mode. So that's just a little bit about myself. Looking forward to the discussion.
Rosalind?
Hi, my name is Rosalind Koo. I'm the founder of CXA. I started 7 years ago after leaving running Mercer and Marsh across Asia Pac, and spent all my savings to start up CXA. We started as an insurance broker in 3 countries, the regional headquarters. But now we're being white labeled by large banks and insurers and payroll companies to actually cross-sell health, wealth, and lifestyle services to all of their SMEs, retail, and high net worth customers.
Thanks. And Tom?
Hi, everyone. My name's Tom Duncan. I'm head of insurance at Grab Financial Group. And we are looking at how we can leverage the power and reach of the Grab platform to better meet the needs of financial service needs of people in Southeast Asia. On the insurance side, we're obviously looking at how we can design products and use digital and tech-enabled distribution to meet the needs of our drivers and consumers and merchants on the platform.
Fantastic. So look, let's get going because we've got a very limited amount of time. Maybe let's start with the elephant in the room, which is the environment that we're in, COVID, the impact. Kind of how do you guys think about your businesses today? What have you had to do to adapt in the environment? What's changed to your product? Just talk a little bit about where you guys were in your journey and how the environment has now changed a little bit and how you're adapting for the future. Maybe start with Tom, because let's start at the bigger end of town, given the fact that you are much better resourced than, sadly, George or Rosalind, maybe.
Well, you know, Grab Insurers is the startup within Grab, but yeah, nonetheless, we're lucky to sort of stand on the shoulders of the Grab ecosystem. Look, basically where we were at before this hit is that we had, in about the middle of last year, started launching driver-side products. And at the start of this year, it really just started on consumer products. A lot of our focus has been on leveraging scenarios on the Grab platform that are contextual and relevant for insurance, so things like rides and deliveries. But we had also just started into travel insurance, for example, in January. And in Singapore and Malaysia, quite successfully launched our first travel product. And obviously, you know, COVID really impacted that pretty seriously over February and into March. And so I guess really what we thought about with our business was, how do we pivot our focus and probably go towards health insurance, for example, earlier than perhaps we otherwise would have? So definitely with regard to like the scenario products in the Grab ecosystem, which is a way for us to build awareness and engagement around insurance, you know, we continue that focus. And in fact, what we did there was we added things like COVID cover, for example, where we were doing a product that added protection for a ride. We also added COVID protection as well if someone was diagnosed with COVID. But also, you know, we brought forward our roadmap in terms of going into health insurance into a couple of key markets, especially Indonesia.
Roz?
So COVID did affect in the first quarter our face-to-face brokerage business. But once everyone went back to work, that actually continued. What it did do for us was accelerate our white label business for insurers and banks, because they discovered that no one wanted to see their face-to-face agent, so they had to go online. There's a very high awareness of health and wellness. And because of the economic downturn, they needed to lower their unit costs. So those were the three things we did. So what we learned in our business is that we now have way more demand than capacity. So it just superseded our white label SaaS that's used by large companies that have large captive bases. So that's been really good for us.
And George, I mean, let's talk about API infrastructure, right? Because I think one of the biggest grievances is the poor API infrastructure that incumbents and insurers have that can drive better product innovation. So how have you managed to cope with this digitization in some aspects, given the circumstances?
Yeah, so for us, the big shift has been during this period is focusing on less about the insurer focus, where there was a lot of slowdown and a lot of ambiguity during this period, and focusing more on the actual distribution aspects, where we've seen a tremendous inflow of interest from the startups that all of a sudden left with no agents or brokers or other places for them to go. So while the insurer side of the business is kind of still scrambling with their internal infrastructure problems, we've seen that they pick up of interest and demand from the startups and from the ecosystem side of it. So that's been, I guess, one of the big shifts for us during this period, is that before there was this dual focus on growing the demand side from the startup ecosystem, from the sales side, and then building the insurance API infrastructure. The insurance API infrastructure, while there's a lot of interest in it still, I think there's a lot of friction still that exists on that side.
Yeah, fair enough. And can I ask, so one of the thematics that we talk about a lot within Insurtech, at least in this part of the world, when you're looking at bottom of the pyramid or the middle class, is this issue around insurance really still being sold to individuals in a pretty formulaic and standardized way, versus contextualizing what the needs of the consumer are and how they may be different to what we need in this part of the world. And I think in terms of what, Tom, you mentioned around COVID insurance being a reaction function to the environment, that lack of product innovation and what consumers need doesn't necessarily get met by incumbents.
Yeah.
If you were to think about the bought versus sold model, where do you sit in that kind of paradigm? Because I'm sure if an insurer was asked this question, they were like, no, we are selling products that consumers want and commercials want and corporates want. But in reality, that's not the case. So where do you guys sit in that kind of paradigm?
Yeah, I mean, I think Southeast Asia is uniquely challenging in many respects, and one of the key challenges is around payments. So if you think about what are the reasons why we're not seeing the product innovation, or that traditional insurers aren't able to meet customer needs beyond perhaps the 2 to 5% of the highest income earners. And I think one of the key challenges is payments. One of our big focuses is just making insurance accessible through breaking down the premiums. It's pretty simple, actually. And for example, we've launched a critical illness product for our drivers in Singapore, where they can pay 10 cents per trip to start building cover, rather than hundreds or maybe $1,000 for that sort of cover through a more traditional policy. So I think one of the problems is payments. How do you take that 10 cent or that micro insurance payment when the customer doesn't have a credit card in many markets, or doesn't even have a bank account in many markets? So I think one of the enablers needed is payments and different payment capabilities, and you're seeing that coming through with the digital wallets. And I think this also feeds into, perhaps George is well placed to discuss this as well, is that legacy systems also provide a lot of constraints. We run into, especially early on, I mean, we've found some great partners now, but early on we would run into discussions like we can't do monthly payments, let alone per trip, because our system only does annual. And that was the end of the conversation. So I think, the work that George and many others are doing to help insurers tackle that challenge is pretty important.
So Janesh, on your spectrum, we are entirely customers' needs based. We've built a company-funded wallet to solve the issue that Tom mentioned. So if the company has an insurance spend for your employees, we allow them to redeploy that money. So if they're married to someone else that actually has the family coverage, they could free up that money and buy insurance for their parents or for their kids or for themselves. But also if they get sick or they're trying to get healthy or they discover they have a disease, we're actually connected to the clinics, the doctors, the dentists, the gyms, the diabetes management, the mental health. So we're building something where it's an everyday app where the payment is taken care of. Because if you don't use up the company wallet by year end, it goes back to the company, and no one in Asia wants to give back the money. So if it's free money and you're sick or you're healthy or discover a disease or what the banks are doing with us, what are your wealth needs when you get married? In Asia, no one will marry you unless you can buy a house and a car. That's the perfect time to sell mortgages, homeowners, auto loans, auto insurance. So we've bundled it based on a user's life stage, their health needs, their wealth needs, their lifestyle. So whatever you can sell to a corporation and to a user, we can bundle both. So that means that you could do P&C, life and health, plus personal lines, life and health, right? So we try to look at all of it.
Yeah, and on our side, what I'm seeing is that, elaborating on Tom's point, it's not just a payments pain point, but it's also about the scalability. So it's achieving that initial scale of similar type of problems in the ecosystem. So if we look at the customers, they are fairly fragmented across Southeast Asia, and finding that common thread that cuts all across I think has been the biggest challenge for the insurers. Like, what is that entry-level product that will be able to give that scale to start to drive the product innovation? I think that's been probably one of the biggest challenges that we've seen come across. And I think where I'm personally excited is the work that, like say, Grab is doing, because there is inherent scale in their platform already. So you guys should be able to be in one of the most ideal places to kind of kickstart that innovation cycle, product innovation cycle. Yeah. So it is about scale, it's about payments, it's all about combining the distribution with the product innovation to really go down to the heart of the customer needs and really build the scale on top of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, George, because I think if you look perhaps outside of China and you look at digital insurance, the overall impact in terms of capturing market share is pretty small still. And I think one of the things is the economics is tough for insurers, especially if you're looking at your quarterly reporting cycles. Digital products need to be simple, low premium, and like you say, it takes, you need a lot of scale for it to move the needle in an insurance company. So I think that is one of the challenges, and I think it also feeds into product strategy as well. And again, looking at Insurtech in China, where digital and these very bespoke products they're doing, often very micro and quite unique, are actually seen as part of a distribution strategy where that's really around acquisition. It may not be the end goal in terms of the insurer's financial outcomes or results, but it's part of actually an acquisition strategy that then leads on to bigger and more comprehensive products for the right customers, and potentially actually sold through more traditional channels as well, digital enabled, but connecting with an agent that matches your needs, that's able to talk to you about a more comprehensive product. But I think that has been the challenge, is that for an insurer to stand alone to launch those very micro, simple digital products and get the scale they need is very challenging. And I think that's where ecosystems can play a part in supporting that.
And can we touch upon kind of one of the issues that I constantly face when I look for opportunities as an investor, which is that when you look at traditional category insurance, whether it's on the P&C commercial or even on the life side, it's pretty conventional, right? You don't really see true product innovation. And I understand that the infrastructure issues and the gaps are big, but the kind of product innovation that I think this part of the world has really yet to be seen, as you said, rightly, Tom, in China, is something that I think is a bigger driving force, at least on adoption, right? You can get the price and the accessibility down to a point that makes sense. Adoption will naturally occur. So in India, you started to see that with microinsurance, right? You can now get breast and cervical cancer insurance. You can get critical illness cover. You can get unemployment benefits. But these are all micro types of products because the ultimate consumer or the agent in these markets can only afford to sell these types of products. So where are you thinking about this? Because is this part of the innovation model that you guys will focus on, or is this something that will be kind of pull driven from your consumers as they come to you and you figure out what they need? Is it a push-pull essentially from a product innovation standpoint for you guys?
We've actually had a lot of success selling microinsurance. So, for example, in China, we're in China. We actually are the health screening appointment for hundreds of companies and all their employees. So, for example, Starbucks has 40,000 employees in China. So while they're making their health screening appointment, and we are the appointment booking and the health screening, we upload the health screening, we ask them, hey, by the way, before you discover you have a pre-existing disease, would you like to buy $1 million critical illness? 47% of 40,000 employees bought on the spot on the phone. So it's just based on their needs at the time. But in China, we also had a lot of luck selling masks and early detection for COVID and teledoc and telemedicine, because after a while, no one wanted to go to see a doctor. So we link up all the components of the ecosystem in case you get sick or you want to discover you have a disease or you need protection. So yeah, microinsurance works really well in China for us.
And George, what about specialty lines? I know you guys launched cyber, for example. It's been my biggest pet peeves as an investor. Cyber insurance never seemed to gel together. And what you see in the incumbents is rubbish. So what do you think about that from a specialty perspective?
Yeah, so we think about it as both push and pull. So there's going to be that natural cycle where you need to put the seeding products, and hopefully that generates enough of the interest in the market to create inbound inquiries. So for example, what we've seen is once we launch the cyber, people are now coming back to us and asking us for work from home insurance for employees. So it's like kind of a completely separate and unexpected, but this is the natural cycle that we think is going to be going through, where the kind of getting the word out about it's not just about insurance product A or insurance product B, which has not really been the approach of insurance. It's about saying, like, what is the insurance actually meant to solve? It's meant to solve your cash flow issues. It's meant to solve your compliance issues. It's meant to solve your retention issues. And then once you start to latch onto that, we're starting to see much more of an interest coming inbound. And that's what we're using to say, like, okay, we can use that to go back to the insurer and say, is there potential for this kind of a product that meets the actual need that is inbound based?
And can I ask, how are you finding the discussions when insurers don't have models for these types of products? Do you devise the construct and convince the insurers or the reinsurers to help you underwrite that risk? Or are you having to think about where the capacity sits across the insurance stack and then do the product innovation and distribution yourself?
Yeah, it's more of a later. So we tried the first approach where we said we devised the product and we went to pitch it to the insurers. And half a year later, you're still going back and forth between insurers, reinsurers, and underwriters and compliance. So it just becomes a very process that's full of friction. And that product innovation cycle is generally very slow. So what we tend to do is now we just say like, okay, can we find the closest match to start with? And then we use that as more of a validation to say like, okay, we've seen an emergence of a need. Let's throw an initial product onto that and see if there is a traction in order for us to kind of then use the scale as a potential hook for more of an interesting and closer match.
I have the same experience as George.
So Tom, can I ask, do you now have, with the power of the distribution of the Grab platform, the ability to coerce incumbents to really think about product innovation? Like you mentioned on critical illness, right? Pay 10 cents. How is that managed? Well, I suspect Grab manages most of that workflow.
Yeah.
Then they deal with the complexities of not having to deal with the insurer, knowing that the insurer is not going to be able to manage that from their perspective. So
Yeah, I certainly identify with what George and Rosalind were saying in terms of some of the pain points. But, we for a start, our business model is that we are very prescriptive about product design. So we're not taking, say, a marketplace approach where we'll take whatever existing products exist and put it in front of our customers. We are very involved in the product design. And we have found partners that are willing to support that. So, for example, Chubb, which is one of our major partners, and certainly on the general insurance side, we have been able to work with them to come up with some, new types of coverage, designed for the Grab ecosystem. So it's basically leveraging data we have. In fact, we can price it. So we go to the insurer with the risk price for the insurance, and it's on at the moment fairly simple things like delays in our service. If there's a unexpected, traffic, that can we actually compensate the customer for having to wait longer than expected due to traffic. So those sort of things we're actually able to price ourselves, and we have been able to find underwriters like Chubb who are willing to support that. And then, as you mentioned, the per trip CI product that we've launched in Singapore. Again, that was a product concept that we had in mind, and I'll be honest, we learned from China. So it's a product that has been done in China. And so we had that concept in mind. And we were able to talk to a number of different insurers about it who were pretty interested in the idea. And in the end, NTUC Income had both, I guess, the appetite to try something new, as well as also the technical capabilities to work with us. But we have done a joint venture with Zhong'an Technologies. And so Grab Insure's platform, our tech platform, has been put in place by Zhong'an, and it does allow us to run a program like, issuing a policy per trip. Every trip a driver does, we take 10 cents, we issue a policy, we keep track of how their cover is accumulating, and that we're able to then take that data and bring it back to the insurer in a format that they're able to digest. So that's an important part, is that, through our joint venture and partnership with Zhong'an, which has been, really successful, we're able to enable these products. We're not asking the insurer to build tech capabilities, new tech capabilities necessarily, or to build the user journeys for us. It's something that we've got built into it on our side.
Let's move slightly to kind of a higher level view of Insurtech in general. Where are you guys with regards to the kind of struggle between a product-centric approach as a business versus being, a platform-based approach? In many ways, Rosalind, you mentioned how your white label business has really scaled and succeeded in this environment. Do you define that as a platform-based model, or do you define that as one of the product lines within your broader coverage? And kind of where do you guys see yourselves? Are you really platform players, or do you see yourselves as platform plus a bit of product, or maybe in the case of Grab, just product only?
So for us, we're a platform with an ecosystem. So the banks are really now moving to health is wealth. So for OCBC, we just launched Health Pass, where we integrated for them the teledocs, telemedicine, the health screening, the medical records, And soon we'll add the insurance and banking. But if you're part of post-lockdown in Singapore, where telemedicine really matters, it is purely a platform play where we can add many, many different products depending on the journey for their SMEs, for their retail base, for their high net worth base, right? So the journey for their SME base is our companies. You know, if you have a company, you can buy lots of different things, not just for your employees, but for the company itself. So you can imagine a type of products, but if you are a user, if you're an employee of each one of those companies, and we are the health, wealth, and lifestyle wallet, it is all the products in that journey, depending on your life stage, with a wallet already. So yeah, we're the journey and the continuum with pre-funded wallets.
George?
So for us, it's a focus on a platform. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about ultimately the scale to drive the product innovation. So between the chicken and egg, the platform comes first to provide that scale initially for the product. And then the product becomes something that's an extension that's logically plugs into it. And then you can drive kind of that flywheel innovation from the initial scale, to a little bit more customized product, to more scale on the platform side, and then kind of continue driving that in that sense.
And Tom, when I think about platforms, and I suspect with the super app model that Grab wants to try and achieve, is there really a distinction between product and platform when it's all in one?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think about that for us, and I think that there are elements of both. So, for example, from a platform point of view, we work with multiple providers, multiple insurance partners, and plug them into our platform, you know, and then looking at the needs of our customers, whether they're drivers, our consumers, or merchants. But through the product lens, I think the go-to-market we've taken is that, you know, we really dig into understanding the customer needs. And for example, you know, drivers in Malaysia were faced with a new regulatory requirement to buy an add-on auto insurance over and above their private cover. And this happened last year. And so as we looked at that, we sort of really got to understand that this is a problem from a cash flow point of view. The overall premium over the year is maybe, you know, $100 or $150. But for some of our drivers that are part-time, it actually doesn't really make sense for them. And so again, what we're able to do there is to design a product where the insurers are able, where the drivers are able to pay daily premium. So they get 24 hours of cover. They can turn their app on, get 24 hours of cover. And, you know, it really suits, especially part-time drivers. Really, for a driver to be better off with an annual product, they need to drive more than 200 days a year. And so that's where we designed a product. But then, in fairness, we actually worked with 14 different insurers, and I still can't believe the team did that. Actually, is that we got 14 different insurers onto that program, which again we were able to administer online to our drivers, and then reconcile with the insurer essentially offline or through file transfers. You know, given that APIs were not available in all cases. So I guess that's an example of where we're actually a bit of a mix of both.
And maybe, look, one of the things that these types of forums help is to allow, you know, you as founders, you as operators in the industry to talk about some of the problems that you face, some of the bottlenecks. You know, one of the interesting observations we've made looking at just the investing component of Insurtech within financial services in the region is that, I don't know if you know this, but in the last 4 years, less than 8% of all Fintech funding has gone into insurance, and less than 2% has gone into insurance overall across all VC funding, which is remarkably low. And, you know, we get complaints that there aren't enough domain specialists investing in the space. But what are the bottlenecks that you face? Is it funding? Is it regulatory? Is it people? You know, how do you see the bigger issues from your perspective? And do you think that they were going to improve? And this is open. Anyone can take this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to go first from sort of the Grab perspective. I think one of the issues we run into, especially outside of Singapore, is around regulatory processes. I would say the regulation obviously is well intended and focused on the right things. So where we run into problems is more just around the speed and process of, say, bringing a new product to market, where you might actually face a 3-month, sometimes longer actually, filing process with the regulator, having probably spent 3 months working with the insurer to just get the product, if it's a sort of a differentiated product, ready to then file. So I think one of the things with one of the challenges is, how do you balance looking after consumers, which is what regulators quite rightly are focused on, with also enabling some of the, say, product innovation that we're talking about to be done in a more responsive way. So I think that's probably one of the main things that I would highlight.
So funding has not been an issue for us. Regulations either, because we white label for insurers and we have a regulated brokerage when we deal with large corporates. It used to be working with insurers, getting them to understand that the world will go digital, that it can't be just a product push. It has to be integrated to an ecosystem health and wellness journey. But COVID actually changed that, where everyone realizes you have to be digital, you have to be online. So the biggest difficulty for us now is really talent. If we have more demand and capacity, how do we find the right talent to execute and to scale really quickly across the whole region? So more of a talent issue than anything else. Get the funding. Where are the people? And so domain is so important, but there are a lot of people with the domain, don't have an innovating mindset. So how, right? So we're really on a talent issue now, more than anything else.
One thing I've noticed, because I actually, before joining insurance probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was in banking and then a tech company in between. But one thing I've noticed is that there's a talent sort of merry-go-round in insurance, where insurance people will move from insurer to insurer.
Yes.
But there's less external talent coming in. And I actually think it's one of the, you think of, say, the HR and talent acquisition process in Grab, and the team is doing that, and the depth of thought that goes into bringing in talent and effort into that, right down to how you onboard people, is so impressive. And I think there's a lot of learning for perhaps more traditional players from the way that startups and yourselves also take. And how do you bring in that new perspective or that external talent and attract them into the industry?
I agree. And how do you ramp them up quickly? Because I also come from a banking and tech and manufacturing background before insurance. Yeah. So how do we bring this in and scale it? And where do you need domain expertise? Where do you need functional expertise? Yeah. So now I'm stuck with the talent issue.
Yeah.
Cool. And
George, how about you? Because you're.
So on our side, what we found is that I think we've encountered all the friction that still exists there. I think the insurer friction is definitely there, like the inertia of product not being able to innovate, and the thinking is still very, very traditional in the thinking of the insurers. So just breaking through that inertia, and I guess combined with that, there is also the regulatory aspects, where either the insurers hide behind it to say, we don't think we can do it because the regulator doesn't allow us to do it, or compliance issues that have been brought in. So there is a lot of inertia, I guess, on the traditional insurance side, that is probably keeping things as a fairly high barrier of entry. So a lot of the progress right now is being built up behind this dam, I guess, that is still not really I would say a breakthrough. And I guess because of that lack of breakthrough, there also is the lack of interest from the investors, because they haven't seen many successful exits. So it's kind of like that cyclical problem again, where everybody is waiting and saying like, who else has done it? And that's where I think we've seen one of the biggest challenges.
Fantastic. Look, I think we're running out of time. I think we could go on for probably a few more hours on this. But for anyone in the audience that has questions for any of our panelists, please feel free to reach out. I hope the rest of the event goes well. And to George, Tom, and Rosalind, thank you so much for all your time and effort on this call. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.